Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining SBC Leaders Podcast. I'm Kelly Keane, the Global Relationship Director at SBC. SBC Leaders is a membership of preeminent operators and operator associations formed to provide a forum for their leadership teams in order to share ideas, promote innovation in the sector, collaborate on major issues, and work to enhance the industry's reputation overall. SBC Leaders Podcast delves into the personal side of the people behind these big leading brands. Our next guest on the podcast is Rory Anderson, who was the CEO of OneToBet and now works as a consultant for the group. OneToBet is a member company of SBC Leaders. Rory Anderson is a veteran of the online betting and gambling industry, joining 888 in 2003, just as the industry was taking off. He's held senior roles at Party Gaming and Empire and is now at the helm of OneToBet, an operator seeing massive growth across the globe. Rory's perspective on the industry is vast, having worked for leading brands from the very start of online. His passion for sports and sports betting is part of his DNA, walking in the footsteps of his father, an SBC Sports Betting Hall of Famer. Rory is also one of SBC's resident topic experts on sports betting and sponsorship. And if you've ever been to one of our conferences, you've likely caught him on stage sharing that experience with our audiences. It is my pleasure then to welcome Rory Anderson to the show. Welcome, Rory.
Thanks, Kelly, for your kind words.
I'm very excited to have you here and to learn a bit about sort of your take on leadership and the industry at large and what's going on with OneToBet. So thank you for that.
Excellent.
Let's get going. As I mentioned, you've had a pretty long and storied career. You were sort of in online gaming when online gaming started. So I'd like to know, just to kick things off, if you could tell us about a moment or two that's defined your career in the space.
Okay, well, my first job in the space was when I was responsible for sports marketing at 888.com. When I first joined, there were just two of us in the office. It was myself and Itai Pazner, who's now the CEO of 888. So Itai's brief to me was pretty clear. It was to get the brand on UK TV, buy a sports sponsorship, and don't mess up. The idea was to start by, buying ad hoc perimeter boards here and there, and then, trying to build that into something meaningful. I guess I knew it was a good opportunity. So I was very direct and focused in terms of getting as many deals done as possible. And my idea was to build this kind of calendar in my head where we had a presence on UK TV pretty much every weekend throughout the year. We did deals in football, in darts, in boxing, in cricket. But I guess the deals that I enjoyed the most were snooker patch deals. And this is where you had your logo on the snooker players' waistcoats. For me, I think most people can do, big multi-million pound sponsorship deals. But with snooker patch deals, there was a bit more hustle to it. And I liked that. You'd go to the events, you'd meet with the players or their representatives, have a little arm wrestle over price, work out a deal. And then literally the next day, you'd give them the patch and you'd see it on TV, knowing that there'd be, maybe 3 to 5 million people watching. So it was a really good experience. I think probably the best deal I did like that was when we sponsored Paul Hunter. Paul was an amazing guy, a really good ambassador for both the sport and the brand. And he went on to win the Masters, which was a huge event with our logo on his waistcoat. So I guess this kind of idea that you can just pick up the phone, organize a deal, see it through to its end is really satisfying. And sports sponsorship, when it's done well like that, it really works. So yeah, I was really happy with that. I don't have great anecdotes about, key career moments, but I guess I've had two interviews, which I thought were quite interesting, sort of unconventional interviews. The first of which was when I met Noam Lanier. Noam was this kind of legendary figure, and he'd launched Empire Poker. And he wanted to build awareness around his brand in the run up to an IPO that he had planned. So I met him at 6:30 in the morning at Heathrow Airport. He was getting a connecting flight from Canada to Israel. And we spoke briefly on the phone, and I was like, well, how will I know it's you? And he was like, you'll know it's me. And weirdly, I did. I saw him at the airport, approached him, and then there were no pleasantries exchanged. He was right to it. He said, right, come with me. We're meeting West Ham, and you're going to negotiate on my behalf. So we went. We sat down with a club in this cafe, and I started to ask the club's representatives questions. And then out of the corner of my eye, I just felt Noam with this sort of huge, almost maniacal grin. And I was just trying to focus on the meeting. And then he started to high five me. I didn't really know how to react, so I kind of went with it, high fived him. And then he cut the meeting short, said that he had to catch his flight. The West Ham guys left. And then Noam said to me, we're not going to do a deal with West Ham, but you're going to work for me. And then he left. And that was that. So that was kind of like an unconventional interview, which I enjoyed and kind of led to other things. I guess.
What do you think you did right in that? Why'd you get the high five?
I don't know. I was kind of enthusiastic, focused, optimistic. I guess he felt that I was asking the right questions. And he just seemed really enthused. And he's quite, a charismatic guy. So this kind of unconventional behavior that I since learned wasn't that unusual from him.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But I guess
I can only imagine how you left the airport.
No, it was buzzing. I felt really good.
Yeah.
But I guess the second interview of note I had was with OneToBet. And I'd kind of met them in pretty much, standard interview environment in DLA Piper's office in London. And we were talking about a chief marketing officer role. And I liked them. I got the impression that they liked me, and it kind of went well. But then I didn't hear from them for like 6 weeks. And I kind of thought, oh, that's the end of it. But I wrote them an email, basically saying thanks for the meeting. I really enjoyed it, which I did. And I got an almost immediate response that said, you've got to come to Vietnam this weekend. And I was like a bit flustered. And I was like, look, no, you need a visa, almost deliberately trying to slow the process down. But they were like, we'll sort that, we'll arrange that. So excitedly, I bought tickets, I booked flights. And so I left on the Friday morning, arrived on the Saturday morning, and I was picked up from the airport. And then there was a lot of hanging around. And throughout the day, various people would come in, say hi. And they were basically trying to get a feel for my character and to see if they could trust me or not, which is massively important. And then we went for dinner, we went for drinks. And again, I was getting asked these questions, not really work related, but more to do with my character, because that was really important to them. And then over the course of the evening, I was pulled to one side, and they said, look, we want you to be our CEO, and we need you to be based in the Isle of Man. And so that was that. So I left actually the following morning. So I was only there for like a day. Due to the time difference, I actually arrived back in London on Sunday. And the only contact I had in the Isle of Man was Nick Morn, the Red Tiger guy. So I called him and I said, look, where do you live? And he said he lived in Castletown. I should live there. And that he had an office and I could share that with him while I got started. So that was it. I went online, found a house to rent, and called the removals guys. And then I moved to the Isle of Man. I would say I wouldn't advise renting a house without having seen it in person. It was kind of damp. It didn't feel very CEO-like.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, the whole experience in terms of the interview and how quickly everything happened, it was pretty dynamic for me anyway.
What was the rush to get you there overnight to Vietnam? Did that get revealed, or was it just everyone in the same place at the same time, sort of?
I think it was just everyone at the same place at the same time. And I think that, there'd been a long period of 6 weeks between the time that I'd met them. Presumably they were meeting other people. Um, and they're very much like that as a company, that things can take time. But when it's
Yeah.
time to go, you go. And it's all, pretty dynamic.
Yeah. I hear from a lot of leaders about seizing an opportunity or something, right? Even, in these sort of very strange situations
Yeah.
where you picture yourself thinking about it, weighing the options and all these things, and then it's just sort of now. And you took both of those.
Yeah.
Do you feel something? Is there some sort of intuition that comes up, or are you just generally willing to sort of take on opportunities like that? Or
Oh, yes and no. I'm generally quite a conservative person, but if an opportunity comes up and it's exciting, and you feel that in your gut that, this is an opportunity, I mean, you'd be crazy not to go for it. That's where regrets are born, I guess. Um,
yeah,
and both opportunities, they felt really good, and it felt that I was joining something it had momentum, and it was going
yeah,
to, an exciting journey.
sure. I just want to, if we can go back a little bit to the sponsorship deals that you were doing in your very first 888. Two guys, I can't even imagine just two people in an 888 office, but I'll believe you. What, like, I'm sure they gave you big budgets and I'm sure they were really cool deals, but like, what happened? Like, were you just flooded with new acquisitions, or like, was it more marketing than you could handle, with players, or like, how did you measure success back then?
Um, 888 were quite, in terms of online marketing and tracking. I think at one stage they were like the fourth biggest advertiser online, in the world. I think after the dot-com crash came, there was a lot of online inventory, ad inventory that was quite cheap. And they pretty much snapped up everything they could snap up. And that was pretty much the reason for their success. So they were pretty much into tracking, very good
Yeah,
at that. But they wanted to build the brand. Before that, they were called Casino on Net. And so they wanted to launch this 888 brand. And I still think it's a lot easier to launch a brand, offline. Um, because all of their traffic was coming online and was trackable, any direct traffic, particularly from the UK, which was the market we were working on, was attributed to the offline campaigns. And we had this pop up that when you went to the site, you were given a choice, where did you hear from us? And it would be like from Darts, magazines, wherever we were advertising at the time. And it wasn't 100% accurate, but it did
yeah,
give you a strong indication of what was working and what wasn't. Um, and we were, it started really small. And as I said, there were only two of us in the office,
yeah,
but it grew quite quickly. And it was more that we'd be approaching people to see what we wanted to do rather than kind of passively waiting for proposals to come in. And I
yeah,
think deals always work better that way.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, but back then there was no precedent. There was really no precedent. You knew there were sports players or sports bettors that love sports, but that's about it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, this was casino, but
yeah,
we were pretty much after about a year, we were probably had the biggest presence within, sports sponsorship from a gaming company. The other big one was actually Blue Square. They were pretty big back then.
yeah. Wow. So essentially, you've been quite instrumental in building the UK market to the maturity level it's at today, or at least laying the foundation.
I don't know about laying the foundation, but was definitely part of the
Yeah.
process, as it were.
from the very start.
Yeah.
So as a leader, we talked about being quite measured in things. What do you think is your most powerful trait?
Um, I don't know. I'm still learning every day. I think that learning to listen is a very underrated trait. But I mean to sort of truly listen and put yourself in other people's shoes and really understand exactly where they're coming from. Um, I know this sounds a bit ironic because I've been rabbiting on for like 20 minutes, but I think that you really get value from an interaction if I think that most people, after about 15 seconds of listening to someone, they kind of tune out and start to formulate their response. Um, yeah, and as I say, I think there's so much more value to really listen, take the time, and understand what the problems are. I think there's huge value in that. In terms of good traits, I mean, I'm not sure. I like to play with a straight bat. I really value the importance of keeping your word. I think what you say, promise, is important. Again, I think that's an underrated trait. Um, but if I find someone that plays straight with me, I'll work with them for years.
Hmm.
I won't be backed into a corner. I'm, in my own little way, a bit of a fighter. So, I've never spent money casually for a company that I've worked for. I've always treated the budget with respect. And I think that's always been appreciated.
Great. When you talk about listening and listening to people, how much of that is problems and how much of that is like ideas? How much, because that seems to be sort of the upside of, do you have to mix a bit of both?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think it applies, and it applies to all walks of life, I think. But in terms of problems, you know, in terms of finding solutions to problems that you face as a gaming operator, you need to speak to people who, in close proximity to that problem. And that's often people in customer support, etc. And it's, listening to them, understanding where they think solutions can be found, where, because they're chatting sometimes with the customers and know exactly what the customers' issues are. And they're the problems that need ironing out. So, yeah, I think it applies to everything. And I find as I've gone through my career, I think it's a good thing that I've become less emotionally attached to my own ideas and
Yeah.
more open to listening to other people's ideas. And I think that's really important. Yeah, so you can remain objective and just look for the best solution for the company. Yeah, I think that's key.
Great. Um, Talking a little bit more about listening and things like that and challenges that other people are facing sort of in their daily day-to-day work. Can you tell me about a challenge that you've overcome that really had an effect on that, on your leadership style and brought you to the leader that you are today?
I can't really think of any one challenge that I'd sort of view as a defining moment. What I can say is that I make mistakes on a frequent basis, and I'm always learning in that way. I'm quite
Yeah.
self-critical, and I always
Mm.
see room for improvement. But I think in hindsight, it's good not to get too beaten by the defeats, but equally not to get too high from the wins, and just to sort of keep moving forward. And I know this sounds quite simplistic, but I think it's important to start each week knowing exactly what you want to achieve and to be able to
Mm.
finish each week knowing exactly what you have done. Um, so I think this, it's not really about individual moments. It's about consistency and the cumulative effect of doing the small things well, or at least with care and attention. I think that my experience is possibly quite different to many others. I've worked remotely for pretty much over 11 years now. And this COVID induced world of Zoom meetings and not being in the office, it's not really new to me. I've always relied on Skype meetings. So when people talk about why I think it's relevant is because when people talk about continuing to work from home and at least away from the office, it's not for everyone. I think it's really important. You should consider getting back into the office as soon as possible, because it can be tricky to build relationships remotely. And I think one of the main roles of a CEO is to develop a culture. And culture is organic. Like, it's not a thing, it's a feeling. It's the way you converse with the receptionist when you get into the office. It's all the interactions that go on. And if you can kind of, carry yourself with a sort of purpose and optimism, that kind of filters through and you start to develop a culture. And to do that, via Zoom, it's really, really tough. I'm not sure how you can demonstrate to your team that you've got their backs and you're all one big team on Zoom. It's so much easier face to face. So I think, while people might be tempted to kind of continue this work from home scenario, I definitely encourage people to get back in the office, and that's where you'll see the best results.
Do you think it is possible to build a culture remotely? There's a few businesses in our space that are totally remote, some affiliate businesses and things like that, right? So I wonder, some people must be doing, I don't know what the culture is, but some must be doing it.
I mean, look, it's not impossible. And you can always find ways to improve what you're doing, improve the processes. My point is that it's a lot more natural when it happens face to face.
Yeah. I certainly found that to be my biggest challenge, was you walk into a room, you just know who the good guys, the bad guys, right? You just sense the energy, or at least that was a strong, suit of mine. I just knew where the energy was that I was attracted to.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many Zoom calls we've all been on, but sometimes you're just completely lost in that. Like, don't know how this is going to land.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And so you might not say a point that you wanted to, and it's all quite formal. And some good things at work happen in informal settings.
Yeah. I listened in on a Clubhouse chat recently, and someone said, I think it was Alex Tomic, is it just that we're the old guys that we're just used to face, and younger people are used to digital interaction and they pick up on things much differently than we do?
Maybe it could just be that, I'm old.
Yeah. I'm in that camp. I think that's probably a little bit of that for me as well.
I often, more with my kids, I'm quite conscious not to criticize, their norms and values, because you just sound like one of those old guys who's just completely out of touch.
I kind of feel like that's a right after you have kids, though, too. Okay, good. Well, thank you for that. I want to talk a bit about sponsorship, since you do have such a lot of experience and such a storied career with sponsorship.
Right. And
sponsorship is such a hot topic, especially in the UK these days. So if we can sort of switch gears a little bit, I'd like to hear, you told us a few cool stories, but I was wondering if you could tell us maybe about a team or an ambassador or sponsorship that you worked with that has maybe been the most progressive and forward thinking.
I've worked with a few good ones. Matchroom Sport are an obvious example. They're very professional. And they have a great culture within their organization, a real can-do attitude. And in customer service as well, when you do a deal with them, they make you feel like you've just done the best deal in the world. And I think that's important. Crystal Palace, I really enjoyed working with them. It's a real community club. They do massive works in the community there, and it's genuine, and you really feel part of it as well. I think when a sponsorship deal is going well when you become a mad supporter of that club, because it's infectious. So deals where you're not really feeling it, it's it's generally, I find, as in with most things in life, it's a two-way street. You get a good relationship going with the rights holder, the sports team, when you put the effort in, when you truly engage, when you take the time to go and meet them. But yeah, I've worked with many good clubs. Arsenal were great. They kind of split the commercial team from the account management team. And I think that's quite important. So the guy you do the deal with, and in some cases might not fall out with, but it's quite tense.
Yeah.
You're then passed over to a new team, which can be a bit of a relief.
Yeah.
You get to start over.
Well, it will come as no surprise to most of our listeners. Obviously, the government in the UK, in particular, is considering a blanket ban on betting companies putting their logo on the football kits. It's all over the media. Everyone's well aware of that. This is sort of on the table.
Yeah.
I think I read recently that 8 of the 20 Premier League clubs have betting firms as the main shirt sponsor. And each of those cost about £10 million a year or a season. No,
I think that's inflated.
Okay.
But it's
okay, but it's not under £1 million, I would say. So there are millions of pounds being sort of floated to be a kit sponsor. So if the ban does go through, that equates to a loss, a huge financial loss.
Yeah.
Why do you think campaigners are targeting that one sort of very key piece of real estate on the shirt? And what do you think could mitigate those concerns on the opposite side?
I guess in terms of the whole gambling review in general, you have to ask the question, what are we trying to achieve? And if reducing gambling related harm is the goal, and it should be, I'm not sure the so-called Asian betting operators who tend to sponsor Premier League clubs are the issue. The reason I say that is because in general, the Asian betting companies don't use predatory or exploitative CRM techniques. Most don't offer bonusing. A lot don't offer cross-sell to casino. There's no casino product. So in terms of casino-related, gaming-related harm for UK players, it's not really there. The UK databases are actually quite small in truth. But that said, if you were to ask me, do I think there's too much gambling-related messaging within football? I'd have to say yes. And for me, the problem exists when you watch a game and you see 4 or 5 different competitors on the perimeter of the match on the LED system. And it's too much, and it's not good for anyone. So, in my view, a solution would be to limit it to one betting partner per club. So product category exclusivity, which should be the norm anyway. And maybe say, look, okay, let's limit it to 10 minutes LED for that partner per game. And then it's job done. There's no longer too much betting advertising. But it's not just football, and it's certainly not just the Premier League. Clubs in the Championship who really need the money at the moment are massively supported by betting companies. And we've done deals with table tennis, badminton, taekwondo, sports that could be considered niche in the UK. And you have to look at darts, at snooker. These are huge British cultural pastimes. They need the support. Sport, the way it works, you have sport, you have TV, you have sponsorship. And each part of that triangle is heavily reliant on the other. TV needs the sport for good content, and the sport needs the sponsor for prize money, etc. And the sponsor needs the TV for the exposure. So I think it would be a shame. I understand the reasoning for it, for the kickback, because I think there's too much. So I think it's up to the clubs maybe to take the lead and say, okay, let's just have one partner per club. Otherwise, there's a real danger of killing the goose that's been laying those golden sponsorship eggs.
Yeah. I heard someone, I think it was a radio, either a podcast or a talk show I was listening to, saying with all the betting sponsors that exist, the message that's being sent to just British boy or girl watching football is that in order to be a fan, these are the brands that should be part of your life or something like that, right? Like it's telling them that if you're really a fan, then you should bet on it or things like that. I'm not sure I necessarily believe that, but I'm not a kid watching the football, so I don't know. Has that come across your thoughts
No,
or
I don't think
area of
arguments.
discussion?
I don't think arguments like that can be just dismissed. Um, I know I'm an Arsenal fan. When I was a kid, I wanted a JVC radio, because JVC were the Arsenal sponsor. Sports sponsorship does work. You can't say that people don't notice it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing the activity in the first place. And that
Yeah.
would be completely disingenuous. Um, but, as a child, as anyone under 18, you can't access our site. I think, it has a place within football and it has a benefit for the sport. Um, it's just don't do too much. Limit it to one gaming partner per club, and then it's not excessive and therefore not as problematic.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I couldn't agree more. Um, as we close out, I would like to ask you what we can expect in the short-term future, 3 6 months, but what you've got on maybe for long term as well. What are you looking at personally, and what can we expect from OneToBet?
Okay, well, at OneToBet, we're currently working on something that should open up a few new possibilities. Unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to sort of go into that in more detail at this time. But what I would say is that customer experience for gaming products, it can be quite strong. You can go on your mobile, watch a game, bet on that game, maybe even switch to blackjack. It can be quite thrilling. But I also think it can be improved. And at the end of the day, as consumers, it's how we feel that counts, and those
Mm,
feelings are generated by the experiences we have. To give a kind of clear example, if you buy a car from a showroom, you're happy with the purchase, you're really excited, but as you drive off the forecourt, the petrol light goes up, and they've only left you with this kind of sliver of petrol. The experience is it's been dampened, it's gone. And I
yeah,
think this works in all industries across all sectors. And in terms of, you need to look at the whole experience end to end.
yeah,
And I think that one of the problems that sports betting and casino companies have is this issue around acquisition bonusing. Look, I know what match betting is. I know about bonus abuse, and I know how both issues can be compounded by multi-accounting. So I do understand the need for defensive terms and conditions. But I think for your standard recreational player, these terms and conditions and these loopholes can make the whole experience just a bit uncomfortable, and it can make it rightly or wrongly seem misleading. So I don't know. Look, it's a difficult topic because if you're to stop acquisition bonusing short term, you do put yourself at a competitive disadvantage. But if you look at it over the long run, I think there's far more value to bonus based on genuine loyalty. So if you've got a good customer, and then I think you can start, enhancing the player's experience and building a better product. Because, if you look at acquisition bonuses in general, they encourage promiscuity. They don't encourage loyalty. So
yeah.
essentially, it's counterproductive and it's very short term. I think when I looked at the US market and how that's been opening up, I'm almost a little bit disappointed that it was so heavy on acquisition bonusing, because I think it was a great opportunity to start and just, lead with brand messaging. And then when you get the loyal customers, throw in a tailored free bet. So if it's an Arsenal fan betting on a match,
Yeah.
give him a £5 bet on Lacazette to score the first goal. Add to the excitement. I think there's far more value there. And I think in general, there's far too much emphasis put on player value and not enough on player satisfaction. But for me, if you focus on player satisfaction, the customer loyalty follows, the value follows. And I think, particularly looking at the gambling review, this is essentially what the UK Gambling Commission are asking for. They're saying, look, put the customer first. It's a far more sustainable route. So I think this is an area that the whole industry can improve, and not just to tick regulatory boxes. It's to thrive and to have a more sustainable future. So yeah, that's my rant.
Well, thank you for that. I will be in touch in 6 months, so we'll hear about all these things on customer satisfaction player satisfaction that you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, in other industries, it's seen as a given, right? If you're not putting the customer first, you're not going to last very long. And I think sports betting in particular, right? It's a zero-sum game, right? So it's a tricky relationship between the customer and the operator. But it doesn't have to be adversarial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. The first episode I did with Matt King at FanDuel, he said similar. He said, we're not going to do any special promotions for Super Bowl. We're just not. If you don't want to come to FanDuel already, it's going to be the same experience on Super Bowl, which is probably their greatest acquisition.
Yeah.
We'll make the overall experience so that you want to come in any day, and hopefully you'll come in at Super Bowl, and I think that's the right approach. Yeah. And I'm happy to hear that, it's come up twice now. That's a good direction to be heading in.
Right. Absolutely.
So on that note, Rory, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for giving us so much of your candid insight and some storytelling with us. You are always a sort of trusted expert with SBC, but it's nice to get to know the personal side of you and your stories of your career. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks again, Rory. This has been the third episode of SBC Leaders Podcast, where we get to know the leaders behind the industry's biggest brands. I'm Kelly Keane, your host, Global Relationship Director at SBC, and you can find us on gamblingtv.com or any of your favorite podcasting sites like Spotify, Apple, and Google. Thanks for watching.